Hello, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Gloria McLennan, and I will be the moderator for the webinar. Our exciting topic today is Change Brings Opportunity. So let's begin by introducing our host and guest. Our host today is Monique Bergener, Senior MSP, VMS, and Client Management. And our special featured guest panelist today is Brian Clark, President, Agile One. Brian, welcome. We're happy to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Gloria.
All right. So, Brian, would you like to take a few moments and share your career experience? You've had an amazing journey, and I think the audience would really enjoy hearing about it.
Thank you. I am, as you mentioned, the president of Agile One, and Agile One is a global workforce solutions company. We're very proud that we now are in 33 countries around the world. And as you look at where we started, and you go all the way back to 1999 and look at where we are today, to me, that growth is so exciting to contemplate. Me, myself, I've been with Agile One for 16 years now. And I was thinking back the other day about where I started and my initial responsibilities within the project management office, and really establishing our implementation processes and how that has allowed me, as we implemented new customers, to witness the growth of Agile One, to interact with not only our customers, but also my colleagues from around the world. I also learned a lot. If you think back, starting in 2014, I had a lot of concentration on our global growth and learning as we expanded around the world in terms of how the various country laws, the cultures, the languages, and other things all impact how people work, and the rules and the laws and the policies that an MSP or an RPO operate, and how different that is as you look around the globe. To me, it's really, really exciting. Of course, I would be very incomplete if I didn't mention how much I love working for Janice Bryant Howroyd, who's the founder and CEO of the Act One group, of which Agile One is a part of. I always tell people, when you Google her and you see her in conferences and in fireside chats, and that enthusiasm and that excitement for life and that passion for what we do, that's how she is in everyday life. If I just pick up the phone and talk to her, that's how she is in every conversation. And I'm not sure there's a greater compliment that I could give her. When I talk about me personally, probably my favorite, as much as I love Agile One, my favorite thing to talk about is my lovely wife, Lori. And we have our 5 kids that are all grown now, and we have 8 grandkids, which I love having them close by and being able to be in their lives. So that's, in a nutshell, that's me.
Well, Brian, first of all, what a fabulous career, right? And I have had former interactions with Janice, and she is certainly an amazing woman. But congratulations to you for your 30 years of marriage and your children and your grandchildren. That is so exciting. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So now let's go ahead and move over so that you and Monique can begin this really, really exciting and relevant topic discussion. So over to you, Monique and Brian.
Thank you, Gloria, and welcome, Brian. We're just thrilled to have you with us today. And yes, I will echo Gloria's statement. Very impressive career, and congratulations on your personal life, your family, children, and grandchildren. That's amazing. So, congratulations. I'd like to talk a little bit about our first slide. Embracing change. This is our initial topic to kick off. We'll have a few slides to review here. But Brian, this is such a relevant topic. Let's begin our discussion about change bringing opportunity.
Thank you so much, Monique. And, it really is fascinating to me, the fact that we see all of these examples around us where people are forced to, or they are adapting to change and doing it quickly. And it seems like the pace of change has increased so much over the last years, and especially, sort of what I'll call the pandemic years. So many are able to embrace it while others struggle with it. And I believe one of the fundamental keys to embracing change is taking the time to understand the change itself, and then exercising what I like to call existential courage. Instead of just reacting only to the difficulties, and you can see on the list there, we've had more than our fair share of difficulties. Those who adapt quickly and start to focus on the things that they can control, what they can do now, those are the ones that really are able to embrace change and begin to make a difference. But of course, all of that sounds great, but it really is easier said than done. As human beings, we really tend to be very comfortable in our routines. And you hear people talk all the time about comfort zone, and we don't call it that for without reason or without cause, right? And that's where I think this cartoon expresses how many of us typically feel when we're presented with change. But the last 2 years have forced us into a mode of almost constant change. And each of the items that I've listed up here typically would be considered a generational issue, and one that we might see maybe one or two of these every decade or so. And we've seen all of this and more in just the last 2 years. And to me, I think that might be one of, if not the most incredible statement that I'll make today while we're talking. Think about that. All 6 of these plus more have happened in the last 2 years. With the pandemic, I can remember having conversations with people. I was in Hamburg, Germany, the week before the U.S. shut down, and talking. Do we think this is going to last until the summer? And then it kind of morphed into, well, could it possibly last through the fall? And then we headed right into 2021, still in lockdown. Next, with the social injustice that occurred, I think that created what we can all agree is really an example of good progress, good change, important change. But we can also say definitely not enough change yet. However, as I say that, I remain encouraged by the focus and commitments that people and companies are making. And we've moved ahead several steps, which again is very exciting to me over the last 2 years. We have a long way to go, but I think that progress is definitely evident. When we talk about the Great Resignation, that is one of the incredible outcomes that started as a result of the pandemic. And while not exclusively tied together, the last 3 items that we see listed there really are there is a link between them. When you look at the war in Ukraine, the ever rising inflation and the supply chain interruptions that we're facing, it's interesting to kind of explore how they are linked together. The pandemic certainly exposed some kinks in our global supply chain, some of which were temporarily fixed, but certainly not completely, as we're seeing today in the real world, the real-time world, I should say, what's happening right now. The war in the Ukraine has created additional pressure and additional shortages, creating supply and demand issues. And that, coupled with relatively cheap access to money for a long, long time, has created inflation issues that we haven't seen in the US since probably the 70s. And I know that all sounds really bleak. In fact, as we look at interest rates and inflation rates going in one direction and the stock market going in the other, the short-term view is really bleak. I don't think there's another word that we could use there. But I do firmly believe in that quote that's in orange up there. Change brings opportunity. You could argue that we're seeing more change than we've ever seen before. And therefore, I would also twist that using that quote and say that we also have opportunities that we've never seen before.
Wonderful, wonderful. And this is just so enlightening, Brian. I do have a couple questions for you, if I may. How has Agile One as a company and your employees embraced and adapted to the practice of change?
Well, it's interesting because the next slide is going to speak to that very directly, but I'll give
Okay.
you a preview in that I think that we used it as a rallying cry. We used it as an opportunity to look at how we were doing business, to understand, especially in 2020. Um, Businesses were very much impacted. Our customers were very impacted, and therefore our suppliers were impacted by the decrease in demand for workers and what that looked like. And so we had to figure out how can we work smarter and more efficiently, and then what are the recommendations that we can make to our customers and our suppliers so that we can find and create opportunity that didn't exist before. And that's where, if there is such a thing as a blessing in disguise, that's where I see it, because it forced innovation that maybe we would not have pushed ourselves towards if that wasn't the case.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'll let you elaborate a little bit more when we get to the next slide. So I'll sit back and let you move forward from there. But that's fabulous. Thank you, Brian.
Of course. So on the next slide, when the pandemic first hit, our founder and CEO, Janice Bryan Howroyd, who I mentioned earlier, she immediately gave us what I called our rallying cry. I think that's the best way to describe it. She said, let's not just go through this, let's grow through this. And while that was very specific to what we were feeling as a company in 2020, I refer to this even now. Change brings opportunity, an opportunity to look at things differently, to do things differently, and to grow through the change. And as we're experiencing so much change right now, I continue to push back on that idea and say that means we have more opportunity than we've ever had before. One of the things that I like to focus on. So with all of that in mind, I love this quote, which takes us through, or takes that thought that Janice gave us one step further. We know that life is going to force us to change, and in some cases we're not going to have a choice. And as this quote points out, your success in life isn't based solely on your ability to change, but if we look at the next slide, it's also based on your ability to change faster than those around you. So our success will come from our ability to see and embrace the changes faster than our competition is able to. And I love that idea. It's such a beautiful idea, and it's a great take on change and opportunity, and looking at the business that we're in and how we can take full advantage of it. It's a well-documented story, so I won't rehash it here. But as I think about who's listening to this, I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with the rise and fall of Blockbuster Video, they didn't embrace change quickly enough. They actually had a chance to buy Netflix, and they turned it down. And so undone by Netflix and really as also Redbox. It's just a great cautionary tale. One of those change management stories that I love to tell, and one that I would encourage you to look up if you've got the time.
This is excellent messaging. Where are these messages used to help with the change management process and the mindset at Agile One?
Well, I think what we're talking about mostly here is the approach, right? This is business approach. This is making sure that our team members are aligned, that we all see the vision, that we're marching to the same tune, if you will. I know we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation in some more details and some specific recommendations as we begin to dig into the impact of the Great Resignation and what that has to do with everything. But as we look at business, this really speaks to how Agile One has looked at things over the last couple of years, and how we're continuing, because all of the things that I listed there, there's not one of them that you can say, oh, we're past it, we're beyond it. There's still a lot of those that we're in the thick of things. Now, personally, of course, I hope that from a pandemic standpoint, we're talking about moving beyond that. But we certainly know there's a lot of people that are still getting sick, and so as we're charging through that, I think it's important to keep our eyes focused on the ultimate goals and the ultimate prize, and that truly, in my mind, speaks to the business change management that we've got to continue to go through and grow through, if I can borrow Janice's quote.
Wonderful. I do have one other question. Have you faced many obstacles? And if yes, then what were those primary obstacles, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I don't know that my answer would be any different than any of our colleagues in the industry, whether you're talking about other MSPs, other workforce solutions companies, or suppliers, technology providers, right? I think our challenges in the beginning, we're trying to figure out what does the pandemic mean, trying to understand what and how can we work remotely and do that better? How can we service our customers when we're now not sitting in front of them every single day all the time like we were previously? Are there more channels of revenue that we can begin to target? I think, as I alluded to earlier, I think that this going through this together has forced the industry to get even more creative. And I think that the solutions that our customers have access to are much further along than they would have been otherwise. And so, as you speak to that and we look at how they kind of all interweave together, we'll talk a little bit more down the road about DE&I, but I'm so passionate about it because one of my favorite things to talk about that's been an outcome of this has been the focus on diversity of candidates. That it used to be tier 2 spend was enough, and that will always be important. But the fact that now there's such a focus on ensuring that we've got diversity of those candidates submitted, those are conversations I get really excited about.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to go on to the next series of slides and talk about change, the future jobs, and the market overview.
Absolutely. And, as we start to look at the changes that we're seeing, I think one of the things that's most crucial for Agile One and everybody that's in our industry to stay in front of as workforce solutions companies or suppliers or whatever the case is, it's this idea that not only how we work is changing, but also that the jobs that we're doing are changing. And there's so many cool fields that now are primary and sit in front of you. I think of cybersecurity is a great example, but there's so many that are like that. And I love the statistic. It's actually one that's put out by PayScale, and they tell us that 65% of the jobs that kids in school right now will perform as adults haven't even been invented yet. 65%, that's a staggering number to me. And so when we talk about change, when we talk about fast change, these are things that I think our industry has to really stay on top of, especially in light of what we're looking at with regards to the Great Resignation and the shortage of workers and so many different things that tie into that. So not only are we dealing with all the topics that we're going to talk about next, we also have this sort of sitting on top of the industry, this fact that 65% of the jobs of tomorrow's workers haven't even been invented yet. And we've got to start thinking about how we're going to be able to fill those positions and make sure we're properly positioned.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's go to the next slide.
So as we start to look at really where we're at, right? When we talk about the Great Resignation, we talk about where we are, the fact that you hear people say all the time that we're in unprecedented times. And I feel like unprecedented is one of those words that's typically overused or used too easily. And while we have seen some of what we're experiencing right now individually in the past. As I mentioned earlier, never have we seen all of these generational elements combined hitting us at the same time. So as we talk through these next sets of slides, um, I want to again call out the idea of embracing change and how important I think that is. We have to see the opportunity that arises when change is demanded, and the fact that our success really is predicated on being willing and able to change faster than our competition. So I want to talk about a little bit about what is our reality, and we're looking at some of that on this slide, what we're seeing now. Then I want to focus a little bit on what's causing that, and then end with some solutions and some recommendations. So as we walk through this, I think that really sets the stage for where we want to go. So as I mentioned earlier, the generational event that's impacting our industry the most is absolutely the Great Resignation. It's been going on for a while. So as we look at it today, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've seen, but mostly we're going to focus on what's happening now and what we can do about it. So trying to look at present day and moving forward. As we dive into it, these numbers are really staggering around the resignations that we're seeing in the US and globally. Here in the US, for example, just in the last 6 months, we've seen as many as 4.5 million people leave their jobs voluntarily in a single month. And it wasn't like that was abnormal. We've had a month with 4.4 million leave, a month with 4.1 million leave, a month with 4.3 million leave again. It just is incredible and staggering the number of people that are leaving their jobs. There was a global survey that was put out. Microsoft had one and LinkedIn had another one, and both of them showed that as many as 41% of workers are planning on leaving their jobs, or at least thinking about it in 2022, more than 4 out of 10. So we know that there's a real cost to turnover. Business interruption and financial impact can't be ignored when you're looking at numbers like this. And we've just been talking about living through COVID, right? Looking at what that did to our industry and how it impacted so many of our customers. Now these high turnover numbers have the potential, and potential is probably not even the right word, because they are creating similar challenges. Again, we're seeing it right now. So if we look at the next slide, so if we take a moment to put some context to the numbers, that we just saw, if you think about what it means for companies of various sizes, right? A 10,000 employee company, that would mean that more than 4,000 are considering leaving. If it's a 50,000 employee company, that means 20,000 are thinking about resigning. So the numbers also are showing us that there's not a lot of difference right now between jobs that are considered manufacturing or light industrial versus those that are maybe more traditional office jobs. Everyone is being impacted by this. I know that we mentioned earlier the supply chain issues and the impact that demand is having on inflation, but there's evidence that the current major workforce resignation is contributing to record inflation as well. And that's where I thought this quote was really interesting that's in the call out on the side from the Federal Reserve. It notes a strong relationship between the share of employed workers quitting their jobs and the rate of wage and price inflation. And if we put that into regular English, it really does make it makes perfect sense, I guess is the best way to put it. The number of employees looking for other jobs continues to rise. Wage competition is going to go up as well, adding to the costs of whatever that particular company's doing, creating additional inflationary pressure. So it makes sense, but when the Fed comes out, or the Federal Reserve comes out and says that it's definitely eye-opening and makes us have to take a step back and recognize just how overwhelming the situation can be. So if we look at the next slide, we're going to look specifically at North America, where we're experiencing record high resignations, some of the highest levels that we've ever recorded in history here. And I find it really interesting if you look at the quit rates. they increased by 12 million from 2020 to 2021. And while we don't have a full year's data for 2022, we know that the rate is the same. It's the pace is continuing the same. And so more people quit the second year of the pandemic and are continuing to leave now than what we saw during the first year of the pandemic. There's also a really interesting dichotomy in that we're also seeing extremely high numbers of open positions. We talked about that a little bit earlier. So many are not returning to the workforce, at least not in traditional ways. When we're seeing more quitting and more jobs going unfilled, the strain on companies, obviously that gets magnified even more. You know, as I think about it, stakeholder and ownership expectations are not going down just because we're going through all these difficulties, are they? It's absolutely remaining constant. We know that there's segments of workers who simply left the workforce and have not yet returned. And we also know that there's others who are participating in the gig economy more fully than they were before. And maybe they're not being tracked or counted by traditional methods. So it's really interesting to see that gap or that gulf between the jobs that are open and the number of people that are actually looking for work right now. I think it's also interesting to look at who exactly is leaving, because it's probably not who you would assume right out of the gate. So while older Gen X and baby boomers are mostly staying put, and younger workers who are starting out their careers are also staying, it's really the mid-career workers, those that age from 30 to 45 or so, who are making the most bold moves and who are enjoying the strongest demand in the market right now. I think most companies view them as the least likely hires, and certainly they appear to be the most attractive to companies as we go through these, really turbulent and tricky times.
Interesting. I do have a question. How are you adjusting your business with these statistics? Because this is quite impressive and alarming, actually, all at the same time.
Well, I think that there's a couple of key things that when we get into our recommendations that we'll talk about, but to give you a little bit of a preview, there's other ways that we can look for workers. There's other places that we can look for workers. We're focusing on starting to grow a workforce that's specific for certain customers. So developing the talent. We also are talking to customers about different ways that they can be more flexible and how they can look at how work gets done and how we define what that work actually is. And so, if you had companies, if we look at manufacturing and you had companies that were very set on 12-hour shifts, day in and day out, and that's all they've ever had. Now all of a sudden, they're more open to talking about partial shifts and shifts that are different days and a lot more flexibility than maybe that we were offered before. So looking at how work gets done, looking at how it's defined, and being more flexible makes a huge difference. The industries, and this is kind of a common sense statement that I'm going to say, but really the industries that have seen the most dynamic movement in workers since the beginning of the pandemic are the ones that have increased demand. It makes sense, right? So there's more demand, but it's interesting to look at it because you also are seeing, even though the demand has increased, you're seeing more workers that are also leaving. Harvard Business Review pointed out that two industries where we're seeing this the most are healthcare and in the high tech. We know that the pandemic put just a tremendous strain on our healthcare workers. They went through probably more than we could ever imagine. But that led to a 4% increase of healthcare workers leaving their jobs in 2021 over 2020. Even though the opportunity's never been greater for them, demand is at an all-time high. I love seeing the fact that most companies who never dreamed that they would need on-site healthcare professionals now employ several of them. Quit rates were even higher in the high-tech space, rising to almost 4.5% year over year. And part of this is being driven by the need for organizations to invest in better tech, to become more digital. That became one of the buzzwords across and throughout the pandemic for sure. Companies needed to improve their operations, and that led again to opportunities with companies that traditionally may not have hired as many employees with those types of skill sets and experience. And while this is only two industries that we're looking at, I know that everybody listening to this recognizes this is an issue that we all have to address. We've got to continue to work to ensure that our organizations remain competitive and are able to attract and retain the talent that we're looking for. On the next slide, you know, this is always the big elephant in the room, right? Money for sure is a factor. There's certainly cases where the increase in salary, and you know, the numbers tell us about 53% of the time is the reason why employees change jobs. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But it's short-sighted, and I would even go so far as to say it's incorrect to say that it's all about the money. We have to accept that burnout is real, that the last 2 years have been difficult, they've been hard. More than 42% of exiting workers cited better work-life balance when they resigned, and another 36% pointed to better benefits. A statistic that should give us all pause: 56% of American workers said that they changed jobs expressly because of their manager. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more in depth as well. But as you can see by these numbers, COVID also played a role in changing employees' mindsets. So yes, during the pandemic, COVID led to more turnover than ever before, but we also saw a lot of people who were overly cautious, especially in 2020. Remember, we saw those quit rates go up dramatically in 2021. We're continuing to see that into 2022 because those people that were cautious, they didn't want to change jobs during uncertain times. Now they're feeling more confident, and we're starting to see them leave in droves, adding to this ever-growing number of people that are resigning.
These are all quite interesting stats, Brian. And you know, what you've done here is the numbers have been brought real life to vision, right? We hear about it, we talk about it, we read about it, but speaking to it certainly does bring everything alive.
Yeah, I think that the context, to me, telling the story behind the data is what is so important, and ultimately what's so important to our customers. You know, and so far we've spent a lot of time talking about the current situation, and we all understand where we are. So now I want to invest a few minutes talking about why we're here, which I think will really create the right foundation for us to discuss our recommendations that we're going to wrap up with. So I think if there's one sentiment that we can all agree on with regards to the Great Resignation, it's that there's no one-size-fits-all remedy, right? Questions regarding what work means now, they're complex. They're all wrapped up in questions about a quality existence. We've had to reconsider, like I said earlier, we've had to reconsider how work gets done. I know that there's companies who have reevaluated their ability to offer more work from home or hybrid work opportunities. I know there's companies out there who feel very strongly about returning to the office. And some have had everyone in the office from the beginning of the pandemic because of the type of work that they do. But as you can see by the numbers that are on the screen right now, there are about as many workers who prefer the in-person collaboration of being in an office setting as those who want remote options. And I really only bring that up because I think it's really interesting because of the unique position that it puts companies in, but also to say that companies need to be open and understand this idea that no matter what you choose, no matter what the approach is that your company takes, you're probably going to have some employees who are really excited about it, and those that are going to want something different, which again can add to our ever increasing quit rate that we've been talking about. But it also begs the question, what else can we be flexible on? Where can we have some agility that can be viewed as a positive by our workforce? I've mentioned burnout a couple of times, and one of the side effects of the pandemic really was this blurring between home and work. And I had a friend who said once, and this quote really stuck with me. He said, "We used to work from home, but now we live at work." And as you can see by these numbers, our teams are telling us that they see this high productivity that we're producing as companies, but it's come at a real cost and one that has left them overworked and exhausted. And I really think that this creates an opportunity for employers to take the human centric approach. You can have a highly motivated, high performing team that works hard, but we've got to be really thoughtful and careful, and we need to take deliberate steps so that companies can ensure that workers feel valued and appreciated and heard. And that doesn't just happen overnight, right? That takes time, and it takes a willingness to invest in those things for your people. It's not easy, but I believe that this is the new reality. And if we're going to embrace change, if we're going to find those opportunities in the change that we were talking about, this is where it has to start, if it hasn't already within your company.
Do you find that overall, because these considerations, which are quite excellent, will be adapted by other companies?
I do. I think that there still seem to be a handful of holdouts that think, oh, once the pandemic's over, things will go back to normal, or oh, once this happens or that happens, things will go back to normal. But you know, and again, speaking of overused terms, the new normal, I don't know that there is going to be a new normal that we recognize at least. I think
Hmm.
things have changed. Wages have gone up, and at least in my lifetime, I've never seen them go backwards once they've reached a new ceiling, if you will. And
Right.
and so I think that there's realities like that. Once people started working remotely, it's hard for them to come back, and certainly there's some people that are, but I think the companies that are flexible, that offer opportunities that fit the needs of the talent that they need are the ones that are going to be able to be most successful in the long run.
Do you think that there are any follow-ups that your team may do to track the progress in order to, be shared with others?
Absolutely. I think that as you see in this report, there's trending that we're following all the time. So we're very clear about where our customers sit, who's asking workers to come back, who is offering hybrid, who's doing 100% remote, and what does that mean to the different sectors. We're tracking other things that they're doing, whether you're talking about benefits or other things that are really important. We also, when you talk about on the MSP side, looking for companies that are willing to give more benefits and consider things that maybe weren't available to the contingent workforce previously as now a standard part of their offering, and seeing that has made a difference as well in terms of their ability to attract workers.
It's interesting, is it, how now it's truly a candidate market, an employee market. Many have become more wise to what they want, how they feel they can achieve it, and they try to utilize it to the best of the ability of as possible. It's quite interesting.
No doubt about it. And I think that one of the things that I had a friend who said, it used to be that businesses interviewed candidates, but now, without a doubt, the candidates are interviewing the businesses and making sure, does their CSR line up with my beliefs? What does the work environment look like? Who am I going to be reporting to? There's a lot of things that are really important to them. Of course, money is, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But it's not the top or the only consideration as it may have been, a few years back.
Right, right. Interesting.
So on the next slide, we're going to come back to that elephant in the room, right? And as I said already, money's going to always play a part. And I know that we've spoken about inflation a couple of times, but I really believe that inflation is the equivalent of what the pandemic was in 2020. Inflation is that for us this year. When you see the staggering price of homes, And that, of course, has led to a significant rise in rental costs. When you see that gas is over $7 a gallon in California and other places, when you see the shortage of new cars available, which led to a steep rise in the cost of used cars, when you see how much more expensive a trip to the grocery store is. And I could keep going on and on. There's so many examples. But it's clear that inflation continues to be one of the main stories of 2022 and a key driver for our employees. And really, what that means is companies have to continue to reevaluate their pay strategies. And we, as a workforce solutions company, have had to assess this multiple times already this year and last year, across industries, across regions, because it's changing so fast. It's incredible. You used to could say, well, we're going to do a market rate analysis once a year. That you're going to fall behind. That data is way too old right now with the way things are moving and changing so quickly. We have to continue to stay vigilant here. As you can see in the call out quote, we're almost 3% behind where we were a year ago in terms of true value from our wages. And to me, that means workers are going to keep asking for more as inflation has them feeling like they're continuing to fall further and further behind.
Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening, isn't it?
Yep, it is. It really is. So, we've shared some sobering facts. People are quitting in record numbers, and we've talked about why that is. There's not a single solution that we can point to. There's not a perfect antidote for every company. We've talked about all that we've been through over the last couple of years. But in looking at that, going back to that central idea that we started with, that change brings opportunities. I feel like we have to feel good about the fact that we're all here. We're all still working to try to go through this and grow through this. It's Even though these are some hard numbers to look at, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. They're very real issues, but we have to continue to look forward with hope. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I think we can continue to focus on. And so this first solution, we've all heard the stats. We know that money is important, but there's a lot more that our employees are looking for and expecting today besides just the money. So my first recommendation is that companies carefully look at the holistic employee experience. And while I feel that the term toxic work culture is really kind of a common cliche, it's true that a negative work environment can exist when leadership fails to pay close attention to the holistic employee experience. The stat on the screen says it all, right? Workplace issues are 10 times more likely to send people out the door than our compensation issues. And so instead of really dwelling on what is a toxic workplace and all the negatives, I'd really like to focus on the opportunity, right? Change brings opportunity. And so I'm really proud to say that at Agile One, we've really doubled down on this idea of evolving our culture and creating an even greater workplace. We have bought into the idea that the experiences that our team members have influences their beliefs about working at Agile One. And that beliefs lead to significant actions that are going to deliver results. And those results, are seen both internally as well as to our customers and to our suppliers. And once you have that in mind, it really becomes clear that focusing on our actions just isn't enough. We have to give our teams different experiences if we're going to change their beliefs about what it means to work at Agile One. And I really love the individual and collective accountability that this concept drives. If I don't like the beliefs that a client or a team member has about me, I need to give them a different perspective by giving them different experiences to change those beliefs. To me, that's so powerful. Another thing that I'm proud to point out is that we started this culture work back in December of 2019. And I really love that because even without knowing it, we started this journey in front of the pandemic. And it allowed us to sustain the energy of our teams even during the worst of COVID. So do we still have work to do at Agile One? Without a doubt. Are we committed to doing it? Are we committed to this idea of culture and changing beliefs? 100%. And I think that as we look at what customers can do, what other partners can do, this is where it starts in my mind, is that holistic employee experience. The second solution on the next slide, each of us knows how expensive it can be to bring on someone new versus retaining the knowledge and skills of a long-term loyal employee. And in this way, the Great Resignation has come at a tremendous cost, both in terms of losing those valuable employees and also forcing us to make unforeseen financial investments in new talent. Embracing a total workforce strategy can help. And this really is, as I said, this is the second solution that I propose. And I love this because these tailored strategies are designed to sort of reframe an organization's unique workforce challenges. It helps them bring all of their workforce needs together. And while this isn't always an easy change to make, I'll point you back to that quote that we had early on. We know that change has to happen. Who's going to do it quickly enough to gain a competitive edge? Who's going to take that next step towards a total workforce strategy? Really, the biggest advantage of this approach amid the Great Resignation is that organizations become empowered to be proactive when faced with retention problems. And to me, that is the most powerful point of this. We can be proactive instead of reactive. Total talent management leverages the best of contingent, RPO, direct sourcing. It allows companies to embrace people and process and technology to support the effective management of all employees while also building in retention strategies. So total talent brings procurement and it brings talent acquisition together, and it allows us as a workforce solutions company to elevate the dialogue, and probably most important, to use data to make proactive decisions about the entire workforce, leveraging that organization's strengths across the entire company. We've talked about the stats already. 73% of workers want more flexibility in scheduling. 53% of the workers in the US who change roles this year will do so because of salary. 56% of candidates left their jobs for culture reasons because they didn't feel appreciated. These are just a few of the reasons why establishing our clients as destination employers, that to me is a powerful statement. That's a powerful thought. How do we make you a destination employer? That's really been priority one for Agile One this year. And we're balancing this with the need for a sustainable approach, right? We can't just go and say, hey, we're going to do this, but it's going to cost you 35% more. We've got to find ways that are sustainable. Sure, there's going to be investments that are needed. There's going to be places where we're going to have to do more because of the environment we're in. But it can't be all just about cost. Things like customized incentives that meet hiring goals with strategically placed investments are increasing worker retention across the board. Our trusted suppliers, right? The folks that we work with each and every day really are our ears to the ground. They are the people that are bringing us the great ideas and who are participating with us as we're bringing forward solutions that result from the success that they've already achieved in other places. So bringing that innovation to us and partnering with us to create that success across the board, offering constant exposure to culture and allowing us to help to grow that culture as we've already talked about. It is how we have to be able to work together if we're going to continue to overcome the talent shortage and meet the increased demand that we continue to see, not only in 2022, but really beyond.
Interesting. Yeah, I have to ask, in working with your various clients, how well are they with engaging and adapting to new ways and challenges of our world and the work and the talent today?
It's difficult, and that's part of the reason why I keep beating that drum about change is hard. Of course it is, but we're going to have to change. And do you want to be on the front end of that, or do you want to be brought, dragged along kicking and screaming? But the world has changed, and we have to be ready to move along. And as you could probably guess, we've got customers on, every part of that spectrum. We've got suppliers that are on every part of that spectrum. We've got people within Agile One that we're still pulling and moving along, and trying to get them to be a little more creative and see how things are working in today's world, and the new reality that we're looking at and how we're working.
Interesting. Thank you.
So my third recommendation on the next slide is that we relook at how to define a contingent program and utilizing contingent resources. In uncertain times like this, to me, it's more important than ever that we stay flexible until we understand how long this bear market's going to last, what may or may not become a recession, and how the supply chain challenges that we've talked about are going to impact manufacturing, and on and on. There's so many unknowns right now that we're dealing with. We've seen our clients gain flexibility by incorporating various models, things like direct hire models, things like partnering with our suppliers to influx new talent into those direct hire models. Obviously, we're continuing to assure that there's gated processes and compliance, but it allows our customers access to the talent that they need. It allows our suppliers to be even more successful and play a greater role in what we're doing. But together, we're creating this access to talent at a faster pace, by deploying tools that allow work to be accomplished through deliverables, as well as through the more traditional hourly model that we're all familiar with. As we've discussed, the cost of replacing an employee can be so high. Usually it's close to twice as much as what their annual salary is. And it's happening with just way too incredible frequency. So we're working with our clients to create upskilling opportunities. This is what you were asking about earlier. For the existing workforce populations, we want to have collaboration with our customers, and we want to continue to work with our supplier partners to ensure that we've got the right programs in place. My guess is that a lot of times people don't think of their MSP programs with regards to options like this, but this new reality that we're in has forced us to continue to evolve and grow, and I love that because it's created these new opportunities that are so exciting. We're all in this together, and constructing our programs with greater depth and going beyond the traditional models really is the new reality for us. Right now we're seeing numbers like 32% of companies in the US prefer to hire contingent workers over full-time equivalents because they say, this drives cost savings, it mitigates risk. But we're also seeing an average of an increase of almost 27% in the global markets that we serve. So that global demand, that demand for flexibility is continuing to go up without a doubt. As we wrap up the session on this last slide, we've covered a lot today, right? We know that people continue to leave their jobs in record numbers. We know at the same time we still have extremely high numbers of job openings. There's many reasons why people are leaving, and what's critical for them has shifted tremendously over the last few years. And I think that's one of the things that we have to remember about this. What's important to people has changed so much over the last couple of years. Companies every day are relying on us to partner with them and our strong active supplier teams to navigate through these, and I'll use that term one last time, these unprecedented times. I think the good news is that we're out in front, and we're talking about it. We're talking about what's next. We're partnering with our suppliers, as I mentioned, to continue to create very interesting and very robust solutions. And figuring out how we can solve these very complex challenges with customized solutions that at the end of the day are going to make sure that our customers have the right workforce advantages that they need to do their business and to be successful in their business. not only in 2022, but for years to come.
That's just wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian, for a fabulous discussion. This has been so informative, so wonderful, and very enlightening, I might say. We always truly value your valuable market information. And with that, I will hand this back over to Gloria.
Okay. Well, Monique and Brian, thank you so much for a very, really interesting topic and discussion. And I will echo what Monique said that, it's all quite relevant and the statistics are quite interesting. And, change is imminent in life and work, as we all know. I will say, though, that what I really like from this deck, and there's so much there that I like in this presentation, Brian, and your work, but I love the quote, let's not just go through this, let's grow through this. I think that is very, very strong messaging to live by as we continue our journey. So, Monique, thank you so much for hosting the webinar and guiding a very interesting discussion. And Brian, a really, really very gracious thank you for being our guest today and speaking on such an important topic and sharing all of this information with us. We greatly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. As you can probably tell, it's something I'm extremely passionate about and love talking about. So thank you for having me. It's been an honor and always great speaking with you.
Well, thank you again. My name is Gloria McClellan, and on behalf of VeriKlick, thank you all very much.